This week on the Four Rivers Ag Report, do they reap enough so you can sow? And how do the soybeans do around the state? And a story that might drive a farmer to think. All that and more on the Four Rivers Ag Report. Welcome to the Four Rivers Ag Report. I'm Fred Peralta. Well, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving and that Black Friday didn't give you a black eye. I volunteered to stay home and mop the floor rather than face that mess, but I still think I made the right call. But we have some other messes to deal with. A couple weeks ago, I came upon a report that stated that we might have a problem getting enough seed for the upcoming planting season. So to find out more, I asked Dave Smith of Smith Seeds in Camargo to come by. And Dave, you've been in the seed business for a while, Dave, and have you ever seen a year like this before?
Nothing quite like this. The last droughts that we had since I've been in the business since the early 80s, in 83 and 88, were different kinds of droughts. So this one is unique to 2012, but the seed supply situation is going to be, there again, unique to 2012.
So what were the differences? Was this drought more widespread?
It was more widespread and more intense, but the difference between now and the early 80s and the late 80s with the last droughts, more seed is raised under irrigation now than it used to be. So it helps with supply situations. So it's not, in the early 80s, in those droughts, it was a crisis because we were planting seeds that were several years old.
Okay.
That the germ were still good. Now we don't. We live a little more hand to mouth in the seed industry than we used to.
Yeah.
So consequently, this drought just causes us a different set of circumstances.
So a different set of circumstances, a little bit more just-in-time delivery as far as seed's concerned. You grow, you harvest it, or you bring it up from the south. You know, not all seed dealer manufacturers have enough wherewithal to import seeds in the spring. Are some of the, what are the issues that the farmers are going to see come this spring?
Well, generally speaking, the large companies, the 3 or 4 largest seed companies, have the wherewithal to go to South America and Puerto Rico to raise seed. Although it's very expensive, so they try to keep that to a minimum.
Right.
The smaller seed companies, not that they're not good seed companies, but they're just smaller volume companies, usually don't have the connections to do those things. One of the problems with seed coming in from the south can be that it doesn't show up in time for an early spring planting for us in
like
the central
this last
states.
year.
Exactly, because if we're done planting the 3rd week in April for practical purposes, a lot of seed doesn't show up until then.
Okay.
So it makes it tough to get it in the ground.
Right. So the droughts hit here and there in every place. I know seed fields, seed plots around here have been hit hard this growing season. Is the quality of the seed going to be okay?
The seed quality will be okay if the companies say that the germ is, I'm making these things up, but if they're 92, 93, 94, 5%, that's what they are.
Okay, don't trust those numbers.
But that's what it'll be. If you actually looked at the seeds untreated without the seed treatments on them, they're probably going to be kind of ugly comparatively speaking, because it has been because just the commercial corn grain is very homely compared to what it's been in the past.
Right.
So, but the germination, the genetics are still there, and it will be, they'll grow. So that won't be a problem. One of the biggest issues is probably going to be hybrid selection, as it is always a problem, or I should say a problem, a concern, because it's always every year the most popular hybrid there's never enough of with any brand. So, and that's not going to change. It may just be exaggerated this year a little bit more.
Then why do they advertise all the time in the morning? I just don't get that. Okay, so you might have problems getting your number 1 preferred seed. Does it help to order early?
Always helps to order early and stay in constant contact when I say constant, not daily,
Yeah.
but stay in reasonably constant contact with your seed supplier because he or she should know, have a better idea, especially as we go into December. They're going to have a better idea about what is actually in the bins, what can actually be put in a sack or a box, and what the germs are and what their supplies are going to be.
Okay, this year we had a really early planting, and we avoided really having to replant much.
All right, yeah. Look.
Okay, of course, what we planted stayed in the ground and didn't come up for a while.
Right.
What if we have a wet spring this year?
Well, there's two ways to look at that. If it's wet early, that could actually help the planting season along from the southern seed supply coming in, because if we don't really plant much seed until the first part of May, which is always a possibility, a lot of that southern production could be here and be available.
Okay.
Then the side note to that is if we have too much rain, too much ponding, we have to replant, then there probably won't be any of the first choice hybrids left,
Okay.
and probably less of the second choice hybrids left. Then you're doing planting hybrids that you might have planted a year or two ago and may not be the most desirable thing, but it's still very viable seed, very good genetics, and it will get us through until harvest.
Okay. Now, you mentioned different types of hybrid. Are different types of corn, will there be different seed pressure as far as farmers are concerned?
Based on the history of our business in the last 10 years, there's probably going to be more pressure on just the pure non-GMO corn hybrids, and probably there'll be some pressure on seed supply with white corn.
Okay.
And the reason being is because we had such a short white corn crop that the folks who buy those processors
product,
and
yeah.
buy that product are going to be looking probably to increase their acreage so they have a better supply, anticipating what we hope is a normal growing season, but yet we anticipated that last year and we ended up probably half of where we were at. So those folks are probably a little short of where they would like to, where they're comfortable with. And for all of us who eat a lot of white Tostitos, we want to make sure that we have enough.
Yeah, don't mess with my junk food, okay?
Yeah, there you go.
Are there different pressures as far as the corn versus beans?
Probably this year, at least in the central part of Illinois, I can speak for, we have very large seeded soybeans this year because of the late rains we got in August.
Right.
We didn't gain a lot of seed counts, but we gained in size, so the yields were pretty comparable to what they've been, but our seed counts are very high. So, and they're, again, with soybean seed as a general rule, they're kind of ugly this year.
Yeah.
But and you won't see it if you're having your seed treated. You probably won't see it. The germ will be fine, but just visually, they're not going to be as pretty as they have been in past years.
Well, thank you so much, Dave. And it doesn't matter if the seed's ugly; you're going to cover it up with the dirt anyway.
Exactly, and it'll still grow, and that's what we're after.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This week, Monica takes a swing at the farm versus town story with a hook. Monica?
Thanks, Fred. I'm Monica Becker. The USDA's crop report is much more pleasant to report these days than it was this summer. Basically, things are going well. Too bad that the big cash crops aren't included in the numbers. Statewide, winter wheat is rated at 4% excellent, 65% good, 26% fair, and 5% poor. The soil moisture is looking good as well. Topsoil is locally rated at 5% short, 91% adequate, and 4% surplus. There are no outliers in the subsoil ratings, 22% reported short and 78% adequate. However, the Mississippi River is not reporting as adequate. In fact, the river's level is seeing the effects of the not so fondly remembered drought and a seasonal dry period. Water levels are at near record lows, and that affects barge traffic, particularly around the St. Louis and Cairo areas. This week, the Army Corps of Engineers are making it even worse. They have started reducing the flow of the Missouri River into the Mississippi to benefit the states and farmers who depend on the Missouri. Right now, the St. Louis water level is down 1.5 feet and is forecasted to drop to -2.5 feet naturally. As the water is diverted, some experts suggest that the level may drop to -5 feet, which would close the St. Louis to Cairo stretch of the river to all barge traffic. Barges presently carry up to 60% of all grain exports from the upper Midwest to New Orleans for exports. But the river also carries raw material for power plants and steel mills. In total, over $7 billion of commodities travel on the Mississippi River in December and January. And the Corps? The Army Corps of Engineers are following a congressionally mandated water management plan, so it will take an act of Congress to get them to stop the diversion. This week, when the depth of the crisis was being realized, legislators and even the White House began to hear from concerned parties. We'll see if the pressure to act gets Congress to act. Let's hope that there's some product to be transported down the river. Purdue economist Phil Abbott says that corn exports will be shrinking in the future, whether or not the crop yields recover next year. Abbott says the U.S. will be using more domestically and will have less to export. Corn needed to fuel the ethanol industry is cited as the largest reason, but other countries have increased corn production as a result of higher prices. In fact, corn prices might force cotton to give up its throne in Texas. The multi-year drought in the Texas Panhandle has made for less than ideal growing conditions, an untimely hailstorm that destroyed in the upwards of 20% of the production, and cotton prices that are lower than the cost of production. This has led many farmers to head towards planting corn. But none of this means anything unless Texas gets more rain more often. Now, Texas isn't alone in needing moisture, and soon. The hard red winter wheat crop in the High Plains is being stressed with a lack of moisture. The crop, which is heading into dormancy, is very short of moisture. In Kansas, only 30% of the state's wheat crop is rated as good or excellent, the second lowest total since the USDA started keeping track. And all these growing issues are beginning to affect the farm income issues. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, which represents the Southern Corn Belt and the Mid-South, reports that farm income and capital spending was down from July to September. This area reported the largest drop-off of any Federal Reserve area for the last year. While the report cites that farmers with crop insurance will be hurt the least in respect to farm income, livestock farmers saw the largest income drop due to the increased cost. The good news is that the average value of the land across the district was 4% higher, which bankers expect will continue to rise, along with cash rents over the next 3 months. Just another reason to hope that the drought is gone for good. Now, farmers and conservationists have been at odds for a while about nitrate runoffs into an area's water supply. Now, research being done at the University of Illinois is trying to see if the best way to clean up fertilizer runoff is with a very simple method. Todd Gleason reports.
Researchers at the University of Illinois have been studying the ability of wetlands to remove nitrates from tile drainage water for about 20 years. David Kovacic says the work proves wetlands can remove about half of the annual nitrate load. Now, Kovacic is putting this knowledge to work near Bloomington, Illinois, in hopes of adding a twist to the research.
What also is interesting is that nobody, however, has ever shown that wetlands can actually clean up stream water. Although we know they can work, nobody's ever put enough into a watershed, enough wetlands into a watershed to actually show that they remove and improve the water quality by reducing nitrate concentrations.
To that end, Kovacic is developing a pair of watersheds near Bloomington, Illinois. One will include a constructed wetland, the other will not.
What we hope to find is that in the watershed with the wetland, that when water leaves the wetland, the first order stream water quality will be improved. Hopefully we'll remove nitrates by 30 or 40%.
Fewer nitrates than its paired watershed, that is, and if it works, the city of Bloomington, Illinois, which gets its water supply from both watersheds, could avoid building a nitrate treatment facility, a plant that comes at the cost of millions of dollars and needs to be used maybe once every 2 decades to clean up high nitrate levels. The constructed wetlands, by contrast, cost about $8,000 an acre to build and have essentially no maintenance cost. For University of Illinois Extension, I'm Todd Gleason.
And finally, we've all heard of urban creep, the process in which farmland gets nibbled up for development. Now, the Herald Bulletin reports that in Alexandria, Indiana, The Yule Golf Club, an 18-hole golf course which covers 158 acres south of town, has been sold. Problem is that the golf course has been below par on revenue for years. So the owner put the course up for sale, and Dale Rinker bought it for nearly $1 million. That's not scratch. Dale is a farmer and is asking the city for a mulligan to rezone the property for agriculture. A hole-in-one, right? Well, Rinker is about a foot wedge away from teeing someone off. Homeowners in the Yule Estates neighborhood, which surrounds the golf course on 3 sides, are not for the rezoning. They're crying foul, saying that removing the wide fairways and putting greens for narrow corn rows and brown soybeans will drive down their property values. I'm hazarding a guess that both sides will bunker down, and a long, drawn-out battle may be par for the course here. I'm Monica Becker. Thanks for watching.
With me now is Russ Pro, the director of the Illinois Soybean Association. And Russ, you farm up by where?
I'm at Greenfield, Illinois, which is about halfway between Alton and Jacksonville.
Right. So you're on the other side of the state. You dealt with the drought, but a little bit differently than we did, right?
Correct.
What is your growing season like?
Well, we started off with a wonderful spring. We got in early, and there was even corn that went in March. We planted our corn about April 10th and got off to a great start. Then we had some rain, and we did not get beans planted. Well, about the 10th of May when I got my beans planted. And then we had some cool, damp weather. They were a little bit slow coming up, and the corn was kind of that way too. It came up slow.
Yep.
But it took off and looked good, and we thought, well, we're going to have a bumper crop. That it had the makings of a good crop anyway when we got started.
But then the drought hit. Now, was it down here? Corn was more affected than beans because we got the hurricane rain just in time to save that crop.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's what happened here.
Okay.
I think the last measurable rain we had was like the mid-June, and then we went all through the month of July with virtually, we'd have maybe a tenth or so here, but not enough to really bring the crop along. But the beans hung in there, and I was out. I take pictures for SoyCam that are posted on the Illinois Soybean Association website, and so you can follow the progress of my beans during the year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was out there every week or 10 days trying to take pictures and wondering, what kind of a crop are we going to have here, because there were virtually, we got into mid-July, 20th of July. I was out there somewhere in that vicinity, and there were virtually no pods sitting on the beans at that time. But then the last week of July, on a Thursday night, we got an inch and a third of rain, and it quit about 5 miles south of me. And that was the rain that really turned our beans around and started them growing.
So we're looking at half a loaf this season. Our corn wasn't great, but our beans were better than we thought they were going to be towards the end by July.
Yes, the corn was really suffering, and even by early August, it was already starting to dry down. So you knew that it was pretty well done. But then we started getting rains, and then Hurricane Isaac came along, and we got 2 or 3 inches out of that, and then it continued on in through September. And I actually ended up with the best bean crop I've ever had.
Poetic justice, I guess. Yeah. So, what should farmers across the state be thinking about for next year's crop? How would you approach preparing to plant this spring?
Well, I've treated it pretty much as a normal year. Uh, I have not put on where we had very low corn yields. We've not put any fertilizer down ahead of beans as we normally do. Um, we did some soil tests and needed lime, so we spread lime on all of our corn stalks, and so that's going to be part of the fertility program for next year. But I'm about 50-50 corn and beans, and uh, intend to stay that way.
So the farmers who've been going corn on corn on corn, should they finally go over to the dark side and start planting beans?
Well, in my opinion, the fellows that do 2 years of corn and 1 year of beans really seem to run awfully good bean averages, and that is a program to follow. It breaks up your disease cycle and helps in that respect to a certain extent. We've seen a couple of years here where corn on corn, that second and third year corn is not yielding as well as, and so they're going to, if maybe planting beans with 50-60 bushel yield at a decent price would come close to being the net value of that crop for that year, and everyone will have to make up their own mind on that. But as a member of the Soybean Association, I'd certainly like to see people consider planting more beans, but that's neither here nor there. Everyone has to run their business as they best see fit.
Right. Well, I appreciate you spending the time with us, Russ. Good luck with the plowing this year, and I hope to be in touch with you again, find out how things went western part of the state in the future, okay?
We can do that.
Hey, thank you very much, sir. Cameron Craig takes a break from forecasting the weather to look back on the month of November in this week's Under the Four Rivers Sky.
Before the first day of November, the nation witnessed the devastation of Hurricane Sandy. Then, if that wasn't enough, a nor'easter dumped several inches of snow across much of New England, hampering rescue and recovery in New York and New Jersey. As for our region, the climate for November was mostly uneventful. Let's do the numbers. The total precipitation that fell in November was 1.49 inches, which is 1.69 inches below the 30-year average of 3.18 inches. The average temperature was recorded at 43.2 degrees, down 0.3 degrees from the 30-year average of 43.5 degrees. For the month, there were a total of 4 precipitation events. The first event totaled 0.38 inches on the 3rd and 4th. The second storm system dropped 0.17 inches on the 6th and 7th. The third event was on the 11th and 12th with 0.85 inches. Finally, the last event measured only 0.09 inches of rain on Thanksgiving and Black Friday. There was a trace of snowfall in some parts of east central Illinois on the evening of the 26th, giving us a signal that winter is just around the corner. While we are talking about precipitation, the drought situation continues to improve very slowly. Much of the region is still in the normal category. However, a sliver of abnormally dry conditions continues to prevail through the southern portion of east central Illinois. The temperature scheme for the month was similar to a roller coaster. Temperatures started out with highs in the upper 50s, then dropped through November 5th with a daytime high of 44 degrees. The overnight temperature on the 4th and 5th dropped to 29 degrees. After the cold spell, temperatures began to rise to the lower 70s by the 10th and 11th, and then dropped back into the mid-40s on the 14th. From the 15th through the 18th, daytime highs slowly increased into the upper 50s to lower 60s and hovered there through the 23rd. A cold front moved through the region on the 24th, dropping the daytime high into the mid-30s. Daytime highs hovered between the upper 40s through the lower 50s for the rest of the month. As we move into the last month of 2012, some people I have talked with are asking about the upcoming winter and when we will see the first big snow. Answering what the climate outlook for the winter is easier than answering when we can expect the first big snowfall. However, the average first snowfall in the region has occurred between the 1st and 10th of December. Daytime highs are expected to rise into the mid-60s this weekend through the start of the work week, so no snowfall just yet. As for the winter outlook for December, January, and February, temperatures and precipitation will remain near the climatological average. That's not saying a great deal about our chances of snowfall.
So that's it for this week. Next week, I'm hoping to get a transportation expert on to talk about the Mississippi, the river, not the state. And remember to check us out on Twitter. We're at 4 Rivers Ag, no spaces. You can see what we're looking into, give me your opinion about what's going on, and generally be one of the cool kids. So work hard, be safe, and enjoy the beautiful sunsets. I'm Fred Peralta, and thanks for watching the 4 Rivers Ag Report.